Keep yourself in the loop of everything football on the Golden State Media Concepts Football Podcast. The latest news on and off the field, be it college football, Big Ten, SEC, Big 12, Pac-12, ACC to the NFL. We've got you covered. Listen to the Golden State Media Concepts Football Podcast.
Welcome to the GSMC Football Podcast, here on the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Brice Lewis. And today, obviously, this is the last show that will run right before the Super Bowl 52 Sunday between the San Francisco 49ers and the Kansas City Chiefs. I know everybody's gearing up for that. Obviously, it's the last week of football for this league. If you don't forget, the XFL is starting the week after next week. But right now we care about what the league everybody cares about. The NFL, their biggest game is this Sunday. The Mecca of football. Super Bowl in Miami. Wonderful, glorious Miami. And we just have a great show for you today. Preparing you for that game. I'm going to give you some of the keys, players, and position groups that both teams need to be successful on Sunday. I'm also going to give some news and notes around the league. I'm also going to give my prediction who I think is going to win the game by the end of the show, and also some just other general draft news and future quarterback news potentially coming out of New Orleans. So first we're going to start with some general news and notes just to get y'all catched up, because obviously there's not a lot happening in football right now with the Super Bowl as the main focus and the media days and everything like that, as media week started really this week for both teams. But in news around the league, Dak Prescott came out and said that he is confident that the Dallas Cowboys and him will be able to reach a deal, and he is confident it will happen. This is obviously big for a lot of Cowboy fans because a lot of people have been actually talking about what the Cowboys should do potentially. Some people feel like, with Brady on the market, should they take their loss and let Dak Prescott walk? Some think, are they really going to give him 30, potentially $40 million a year, because that's what a franchise starting quarterback gets nowadays? Do they franchise Dak Prescott and give him another year to prove himself? There's a lot of things that the Cowboys can do here, and a lot of people are intrigued to see what the Cowboys decide to do. I think it's very interesting in my own right to see what happens, because the biggest thing for the Cowboys is, with Mike McCarthy coming in as your new head coach, you kind of want to, one of the reasons why you brought him in is you feel like you have talent already to make the Super Bowl. So I feel like if that's the case, outside of some of the holes that you may have, and you feel that over the offseason through draft and free agency, there still isn't a final decision on Dak if he's a franchise quarterback. But thing about Dak, he's won division titles, he's won a playoff game. He has won in this league. So there are some things that you can look at and say, well, yeah, you could pay Dak based off this, but some people think you still need to give him another year, especially with a new coach. Because, a lot of people think Jason Garrett was holding back the Cowboys. So maybe with a new coach, you get to see how good they really are, potentially. So obviously that's a question that is needed to be answered. And obviously, I'm sure Dak wants to stay with the Cowboys. I'm sure he wants this deal done. A lot of the time, these players, they just want the deal done. They just want to get what they feel like is rightfully owed to them, which is the money they feel like they're worth, and then stay. You never hear a lot of teams saying, or players saying, I want to leave. Because if they want to leave, they just request a trade, or in this situation, he won't even think about negotiating. But clearly, he wants to stay. He wants to be a Dallas Cowboy quarterback. He wants to lead this team to a championship one day. So it's one of those things where it's going to be interesting. They also have a lot of big free agent decisions to make, like on Amari Cooper. That's one reason why this decision is kind of complicated, because it's like, if we pay Dak, will we have enough money to pay somebody like Amari, or will we have to let him walk? So those are kind of like the big questions that the Dallas Cowboys have to kind of answer and decide if it's the best case or the best source of action for the team to make, paying Dak Prescott that much money, or just giving him the franchise tag and then doing this entire thing over again next year after seeing what he does with Mike McCarthy as the head coach. In other news, we're going to get into some talk about Bill O'Brien, as the Houston Texans last year they fired their GM. And they didn't have one the whole year. They kind of had a GM committee, but now they've officially made Bill O'Brien the head coach of the GM. Now, obviously, this is something that a lot of people are very, very questioning a lot, because a lot of people aren't sold on Bill O'Brien as a head coach, even though they've won, because they feel like, well, he's won because he's had Deshaun and DeAndre Hopkins, and he's had offensive weapons, and he's had some good talent. But a lot of people feel like Bill O'Brien is not a great coach. He's not a great detailed coach. He sometimes makes some boneheaded decisions like he did in the AFC divisional game against Kansas City. And so making him the GM now, giving him that much responsibility, a lot of people are wondering, is this going to hurt Deshaun Watson? Because obviously, you have your franchise quarterback, but you need more around him. You need even better support and better structure, better offensive line, and better defense and better secondary for them to compete for a championship. So obviously people are kind of just like, is Bill O'Brien the guy for the job? Because like I said, the way they lost the Kansas City game, you had some Houston fans kind of wanting Bill O'Brien to leave. I feel like from what I get from the Houston Texans fans, they're not really a big fan of Bill O'Brien. So making him the GM, I'm sure, doesn't make a lot of them happy, because now it's all on Bill O'Brien. Like, he basically has control of like how this team is assembled. So if this team has all these holes and they continue to have the same issues they've had, you may feel like Bill O'Brien is what's holding the Houston Texans back from being successful, and you're going to question the ownership of the Houston Texans and wonder why haven't they made, a deal to get rid of Bill O'Brien. So, all those are questions that have to be answered. And I'm sure we'll see what happens. I mean, when you're a playoff team, in my opinion, a lot of the time, you kind of already know what your weaknesses and strengths are. So you need to fix those weaknesses and strengths. Like Houston offensively, offensive line is still the same issue. Defensively, you're secondary. So it's going to be important that the Texans fill both of those holes. Obviously, again, since Bill O'Brien is the GM now, he's sole responsible for filling those holes and finding talent to put in those positions. I reported last week that the Houston Texans are on the market for a top-flight cornerback or for corners because they know what their weakness is, and they want to get some of the guys like Chris Harris Jr. or Byron Jones potentially. Philadelphia is also looking for corners. So, like I said, when you're a team like this, you just try to address the holes that you think are there and hope that all the things that have been successful for you up to this point remain in that same way and remain in the same position, so to say. So it's very interesting that they made that decision and went ahead and kept Bill O'Brien basically with more power now, which I know a lot of Houston Texan fans are not particularly the happiest about. And now, in the last bit of news for this segment, the Panthers are going to have a full workout with Cam Newton in March to get an evaluation on Cam to see where he is. Obviously, Cam Newton's coming up in a lot of big discussions within the organization, trying to figure out, do we keep him for a year? Do we trade him? Do we cut him? What do we do with Cam? But obviously, Cam's been hurt the last couple of years, has had a lot of injuries. He ended his season early last year with a shoulder injury. So I think with Matt Rule as the new head coach, he wants to see, well, where is Cam right now in terms of health? How good can he throw? Where is he at physically? And maybe that'll help him make a decision on what to do with Cam, because, like I said, if you don't have to get rid of Cam, you don't have to. But if you really think that you maybe can get some good value for Cam, obviously it's something you will look into and try to get. So it's something that, is going to be interesting, I think, for Matt Rule and the decision to see what happens with Cam Newton. Because you do have teams that will be vying for Cam Newton if they want to trade him away and give him to another team for potential draft stocks or maybe some players to fill other holes on the Carolina Panthers. So obviously that's the interesting decision that has to be made here. But coming up next, we're going to talk about which team in the Super Bowl, Kansas City or San Francisco, is the more sustainable dynasty long term? And also the journey of Patrick Mahomes and Jimmy Garoppolo right here on the podcast.
Are you looking for help for your fantasy football team? Check out the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast. Get today's best advice on who to start, who to sit, even who you should draft. From sleeper picks to red-hot lineups, they got it all covered for you. That's gsmcpodcast.com/fantasy-football-podcast. We'll cover traditional leagues, dynasty, PPR, even IDP leagues. When you need fantasy help, there's just one show to hit up. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit gsmcpodcast.com for more info.
Welcome back to the GSMC Football Podcast. Last segment, we discussed some news and notes around the league, like Cam Newton trying out for the Carolina Panthers, working out for the Panthers to see where he is physically so they can make a decision on him going into the future. We also talked about Dak Prescott being confident that deal will be done for his contract with the Dallas Cowboys this offseason. And we also talked about Bill O'Brien becoming the new general manager of the Houston Texans, how that was kind of received by Houston fans, and what a lot of people may think, and what people may question about Deshaun Watson if since this move has been made. Now we're going to get into some Super Bowls talk here, and we're going to talk about which team is more sustainable long-term for our dynasty, Kansas City or the San Francisco 49ers. So I'm going to break them down first for you. Now, obviously, San Francisco, you feel like from a team perspective, they have built this team through the draft, and they've picked up key free agents. Their entire defensive line is first-round picks that they drafted. You know, that's the strength of their defense is the defensive line, and it was all drafted before and after John Lynch got there. They drafted George Kittle. They drafted Deebo Samuel. You know, they drafted half their offensive line. They have made some good decisions about their team where they're young but talented, which is why they're in the Super Bowl. They have a great mind at head coach. They feel like they have their quarterback for the future in Jimmy Garoppolo. And their style of play is very sustainable, especially if they remain being a power football team. As long as they have a good offensive line and they can run the football and Jimmy G plays very efficient football, you don't see why the 49ers couldn't be back in this place next year. They have all the talent in the world to be better. And I think that that's something that helps them look and be sustainable long term. Where if you look at Kansas City, you have what some people are going to consider now the best quarterback in the NFL for the next few years to come. You have one of the best passing attacks with Kelsey and Hill and Miko and Sammy Watkins. You know, you have one of the most fastest, but also one of the best receiving cores in the league. Kansas City and Andy Reid especially has never been a running person, and with Philadelphia, he was able to sustain success. Now, he may have not had the same quarterback, no offense to Donovan McNabb, but, you know, he had talent in Philadelphia, and he has talent here. And then defensively, they've improved. Obviously that was their weakness last year. Now they're a better defensive team this year. They've made strides defensively. They have some guys, some key defensive linemen like Frank Clark up front, and Chris Jones that can disrupt the pass and stop the run. You know, obviously, if you look at the two teams, San Francisco is the more complete team now. So it's easier to say they'll be the team with the most success long term. But at the same time, you can make the argument that the Kansas City has one of the most dominant teams in the league. They were dominant last year offensively, especially. And they seem to be dominant again this year. So, which one is more sustainable? Well, if you think about it logically, the one thing that we know is the NFC has usually been the tougher conference than the NFC. The AFC has usually been the less tougher conference than the NFC. The NFC usually is every year you don't know because it's usually very different teams can come out of the blue and be the best team in the NFC. The AFC usually every year it's usually the same teams. Houston most years, Patriots, usually either Baltimore or Pittsburgh, and obviously the Chiefs are now going to be that team, but the Chargers could have a good year. Denver could maybe make it back. Where NFC, it's like, you never know. Eagles could be the best team one year. The Cowboys could be the best team one year. The Falcons could be the best one team. The Saints could be for the last two. The Vikings could be, it's obviously going to be a great team. The Packers could be a great team. The Bears, if they get right, could be a great team. Seattle, Russell Wilson. Rams could be back next year. Obviously, we already know about the San Francisco 49ers. I mean, as you can tell, this is a wide open conference where you don't know which 6 teams are going to be good or at that level to make the playoffs next year. So for me, I feel like maybe for me, I'm going to go more with, right now, the Kansas City Chiefs as more sustainable because of how great their quarterback is. It's one of those things where, if you think about how the Patriots have been, even when they didn't have the best roster talent, they had Brady. And that was why they were always in contention to win a Super Bowl year after year after year. And I feel like Patrick Mahomes is that guy where as long as he's healthy and you have weapons, you'll be able to compete for a Super Bowl year after year after year. Whereas San Francisco, I do feel like the way their team is set up, they have to have a lot of things go right for them to be in the contention. Because we don't know. What if San Francisco has a bad defensive year? Will Jimmy G be able to score enough points to win games? Will they abandon the running? We don't know what San Francisco would be if things got out of place. The Chiefs, they've won and almost made the Super Bowl without a bad defense last year. So they've shown, even with limitations defensively, they can still be a championship team potentially. So from that, you just kind of think I put more of my trust in Patrick Mahomes long term than Jimmy Garoppolo. But we'll have to see. Whoever wins the Super Bowl game might make it kind of be like, okay, yeah, this team's going to be the dynasty for the next couple of years if they continue to play like this. Now, if you think about the journey of both of these quarterbacks, Jimmy Garoppolo, back up to Tom Brady, was supposed to be Tom Brady's replacement, the future of the Patriots. Then traded for a second-round pick to the San Francisco 49ers. Honestly, a steal for Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch. Bill Belichick called them saying, hey, I'll give you Jimmy Garoppolo for a 2. Patrick Mahomes, very electric in college, but wasn't on the greatest college team in Texas Tech. And then got to the league. It was a first-round pick, but sat behind Alex Smith for a year and finally got his chance, and we saw what happened. It's kind of an interesting story. Both guys were with, Garoppolo sat behind Brady. Mahomes sat behind Alex Smith. They were both, I feel like, put in great situations when they were traded or drafted to their teams. And they have both came a long way. And what they do for their teams works. And now these two guys could, be the future of the NFL. They could be the future. Like the future rivalry of the NFL. From an NFC, AFC perspective. And so for me, I feel like both quarterbacks, obviously we know Patrick Mahomes is probably going to get paid monster money. Like we're talking another record-breaking contract. We probably know that's going to happen with Patrick Mahomes. Jimmy Garoppolo was given a deal when he was traded for. So right now, Jimmy Garoppolo's, based on how quarterbacks are getting paid, is on a bargain right now. With a lot of quarterbacks. He's getting paid the least out of the starting quarterbacks in this league. And I feel like the Super Bowl will definitely help whoever's trajectory as they continue the journey and stories they're writing for their respective careers. And it'll be exciting to see what happens between the two of those guys long term. So, Mahomes looks like he's going to be the young guy who's going to be taking over the league and be the best quarterback for years. And Garoppolo's going to be a guy who's solid, good every year, does the right things, doesn't make a major mistake, and just plays well and plays within his skills in the offense. So, it's going to be interesting to see what happens on Sunday. But coming up next, I'm going to give you five players or skill positions, not separately but together, that I think the Chiefs need on Sunday to be successful in winning the Super Bowl.
Check out the show that's built on the MMA. From the UFC to extreme cage fighting, they got the fights covered. Check out the GSMC MMA podcast. Get the latest news on past or upcoming fights. Join us as we talk to and about some of the biggest names in the MMA, past, present, and future. When it's the fight game, there's just one show to check out. GSMCpodcast.com/MMA-podcast. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
Welcome back to the GSMC Football Podcast. Last segment, we talked about which teams has a better chance for a lasting dynasty, and also a small little journey on both quarterbacks with Patrick Mahomes and Jimmy Garoppolo getting to where they are today, and hopefully continuing into the future and into their future careers, because they're both only really Jimmy Garoppolo's in his first real whole season as a starting quarterback, and this is this is Patrick Mahomes' second real year of being the starting quarterback of the Kansas City Chiefs, as both of those players have a very exciting future ahead of them. Now I'm going to give you some players/skill positions, 5, that I think are going to be important for Kansas City to be able to come out with a victory on Sunday. We'll do the San Francisco next segment. So first guy I'm going to talk about is, I think Damian Williams has to play a big game. Because I think one thing I think about Kansas City is they don't really use their running backs for running. They use their running backs for passing. Obviously, a lot of people are going to try to bracket coverage on Tyreek Hill or on Travis Kelce. And San Francisco is probably one of the better man-to-man teams in terms of talent to guard these guys. So I think the running back's going to have to take advantage. I think Damian Williams and LaShawn McCoy are going to have to make some plays, get some first downs, maybe make a big play over the top. I think that's what's going to be kind of important. I believe that if Damian Williams has a big game, it will probably be more closer to solidify that Kansas City will win this game, just because it's one thing, because the thing is if Damian Williams starts killing you out of the backfield, what are you going to do? Because you want to bracket your coverage on Hill or Hardman or Travis Kelce, but your linebackers are getting killed by Damian Williams, so it's kind of like, what do you do now? How can we guard this team? And it could be especially worse if maybe the Kansas City Chiefs were able to establish a running game. Because usually the Chiefs, what makes them so great is that they're going to pass it, but you still can't stop. Because there's weapons, there's just too many weapons. If they were actually able to run the ball in San Francisco, it's going to be hard to see how they can even come out with a victory if you were the San Francisco 49ers. The second guy that I think has to have a big game for them to be successful is Tyrann Mathieu. He will be responsible for guarding Travis Kelce, and sometimes maybe one of the receivers like Mecole Hardman or Tyreek Hill, because Tyrann Mathieu also plays some slot. The reason why he will also have some giving up responsibility with Travis Kelce is because the 49ers do have Quan. What am I saying, Travis Kelce? George Kittle. My bad. Not Travis Kelce. George Kittle. Tyrann Mathieu has to guard George Kittle. Now, with Tyrann Mathieu, he's going to have to guard George Kittle. He's going to have to guard Emmanuel Sanders from time to time, probably. Maybe Deebo Samuel from time to time. It's going to be important that he plays one of his best secondary games. And, I think it's important for him to hold up, Because one thing that makes Tyrann Mathieu such a great player is his playmaking. And with George Kittle technically being the best receiving weapon that the San Francisco 49ers have, he's going to get some attempts to maybe make a play while guarding Travis Kelce. And so if he can make some plays, it will definitely help the Kansas City Chiefs, because they can get a couple of turnovers on Jimmy Garoppolo and give some shorter and more possessions for Patrick Mahomes. That just means more opportunities for them to have another big offensive output. And also, the defense has been getting turnovers in the second part of the year, which is another reason why the defense has played better overall. And Tyrann Mathieu has been the spin man who's been spearheading that type of effort. Now I'm going to go into a position group for the Chiefs that have to play well. I believe the linebackers have to play very, very well in this game, because I think the 49ers are going to want to run the ball at waist clock. So, yes, listen, the Chiefs have two guys in Frank Clark and Chris Jones up front who can dominate a game. But San Francisco's offensive line is also one of the better ones in the league. So, that means running backs might be getting to the next level. So, what's going to be important for the Kansas City linebackers to fill gaps and fill holes, read their assignments, and make the right reads. Because you don't want the 49ers being able to gash you on the offensive end. Because if they do that, now you're playing into their hands where they can get some clock. And then if San Francisco creates opportunities off of it, they can score points. And now you're over here not getting as many possessions for Patrick Mahomes, while also letting up points on the defensive end to the 49ers. And now the game's going to become more of a slower game. And Kansas City may be under more pressure to score, because it's like, how many possessions are we going to get? Then, we're going to get plenty of possessions. So even if we don't get one here, we know we can get one later. So that's going to be one of the things that I think that the position groups that have to play well for Kansas City, the linebackers have to play well. If they do not play well, it's going to be a long day for them defensively. A very, very long day for them defensively. Another position group for Kansas City that has to play well. Their receiver. Kansas City has to play well. Their offensive line. You're going against one of the best, if not the best, pass rush in the NFL in the San Francisco 49ers. They have all these guys. D Ford, Armstead, Buckner, Thomas, Bosa. They have a lot of talent up front. They can dominate you and dominate a game up front. So Kansas City's offensive line is going to have to play probably one of their best games they've played all year. Because those guys are going to be coming, and they're going to be coming fast, and they're going to be coming hard. And so you can't sit here and sometimes do those long developing plays. I think if you're Kansas City, you got to kind of come out and do a lot of quick passes and just get the defense to not rush as hard. Because if you try to do those plays that make you have to develop the play longer, you could be playing into San Francisco's hands with that defensive line. Because if the Kansas City offensive line cannot block San Francisco's defensive line, that could neutralize Patrick Mahomes in the passing game, especially with the defensive unit as a whole that San Francisco has. It's going to be very important that they can get time for Patrick Mahomes, and Patrick Mahomes can make plays. Because if they don't, it's going to be a very, very long day for Kansas City offensively if their offensive line cannot block San Francisco's defensive line. And the last player I feel like that has to do good in this game is the guy himself, the legend himself, Patrick Mahomes. He has to have probably one of his most efficient games of the year. I'm not going to say he has to have his biggest numbers or the most touchdowns or the most yards, but he has to have one of his most efficient games in the playoffs, in the Super Bowl. Because if you're efficient against the San Francisco 49ers, that's going to set up for success against this defense. Because the San Francisco secondary is susceptible to big plays. They have let up plays in the secondary, which is the Chiefs' strength. But like I said, they have a great defensive line, so if the offensive line can block, Patrick Mahomes just has to be efficient. Move the ball and score points, which we know that's never an issue for them. If they can get into one of those runs that they get on where they start scoring a lot of points, this game could become very easily out of reach for the San Francisco 49ers. So it's going to be important that Patrick Mahomes establishes a rhythm, he is efficient, and makes the right decisions. Because then those big plays will come later in the game, and Kansas City could potentially open the game up and help provide a victory for them and bring a Lombardi Trophy home to Kansas City. And Patrick Mahomes starts his young career as a Super Bowl champion and tries to become the youngest player to win an MVP in a Super Bowl before the age of 25. So, if Patrick Mahomes is Patrick Mahomes, there's a very strong possibility Kansas City will be going home with the trophy. But we're going to take another quick break here. Coming up, we're going to talk about San Francisco's 5 players or key positions they have to have play at their best to be able to bring home the championship on their end. Right here on the podcast.
Check out the show built around the women of MMA. From the UFC to the extreme cage fighting, we got the fights covered.
Listen.
It's the Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast. The latest news of upcoming fights, discussions of previous matches. Join us as we talk to and about the biggest names in women's mixed martial arts. Past, present, and future. When it's the women's fight game, you know where to listen to. The Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast.
Welcome back to the GSMC Football Podcast. Last time we broke down 5 players and position groups that Kansas City needs to play at their best for them to be able to take home the Lombardi Trophy on Sunday. Now I'm going to switch over to the San Francisco side of things and talk about 5 players / position groups that they need to play well for them to be able to take home the championship this Sunday in Super Bowl 52. Obviously, the San Francisco does a lot of things well. So the players and position groups I pick, I feel like they have to either continue to play well or play even better for them to be able to take home the championship against a high-powered, dominant Kansas City team. So the first player that has to play well for Kansas City is really, I'm going to start with the obvious one. Jimmy G. Jimmy G's going to have to make some big throws in this game. He's going to have to score some points through the air. You think it's very unlikely that Kansas City is going to allow like a guy like Mozart or any of the running backs to have the kind of night they had against Green Bay and beat them that way. You kind of don't see that. So you feel like, especially with the offense they have, they might not be able to run it like that. They may get behind early. So it's going to be very important for Jimmy G to be able to make throws with his arm and make big plays because they're going to need it if they're going to be able to keep up. Like, again, it's kind of like what I said about Patrick Mahomes. He doesn't have to have like a 450-yard game and 5 touchdowns. But he does need to be efficient, and he does need to score when he has possessions and get key for third downs. Because obviously, listen, Kansas City's more of a big play offense. San Francisco's more of a methodical offense. So he's going to have to make sure he makes good throws, pick up the change, move the ball, and then score touchdowns and finish drives off if they're going to beat a team like Kansas City. it all runs through Garoppolo on this point because, listen, you have weapons, you have Kittle, you have Emmanuel, you have Debo. You got guys. You got to make plays. Because you don't want to have a very inefficient day, incomplete passes, leave more time on the clock, 3-and-outs, quick 3-and-outs, and put your defense right back out there against Patrick Mahomes. Your defense is great, but even a great defense can get tired. So it's important that they are able to make some throws through the air because they will be put into some positions where they're going to have to throw the ball against the Kansas City Chiefs and be able to successfully make those plays and continue drives and continue long drives really for the necessary portion of the game. And then another position group for the San Francisco 49ers is the secondary, obviously. The secondary has to play well. They are probably playing one of the most complete wide receiving cores they've played all year. And San Francisco has been susceptible to the pass. You know, Witherspoon, the corner for San Francisco, has not played the best the last couple of weeks. So if he's on the field, he will definitely be targeted. And Richard Sherman doesn't travel, so whoever gets on him, hopefully he can lock him up. So it's going to be very important, very, very important that the secondary of the San Francisco 49ers plays a great game. I think they need to be physical with Kansas City's receivers because I feel like the secondary of the 49ers is a bigger secondary, so they need to be physical. They need to play tough. They need to play up in their face, bump them off the line, mess up timing between Patrick Mahomes and whoever he's trying to throw it to. And I think that will create the most reasonable success for them to be able to stop. And I mean, you may not be able to stop them completely, but slow down, the Kansas City Chiefs offense and maybe get quick 3-and-outs or get some possessions where they don't lose too much clock and don't let Kansas City score. And then San Francisco's offense can get back on the field, waste more clock, and move the ball and score. So it's going to be very important that San Francisco's secondary probably plays one of their best games of the year because they're going to be in for one of the biggest challenges of the year against this Kansas City passing attack, one of the most dominant passing attacks we've seen in a very long time in the NFL. Another position group that has to play well for San Francisco are the running backs. Mozart, Tevin Coleman, Breida. All of them have to listen. Obviously, San Francisco's kind of like a whoever is hot type of thing. But all of them are going to play, and all of them need to play well. Because it helps knowing you have 3 different backs. Because even if one isn't going, maybe 2 can go. Even if 2 aren't going, you got 1 that can go. You just need one who's having success against that defense. You need one who can get something against that defense in receiving and in running and in rushing the ball too. They've run a power run zone scheme, which has been very successful, but they're going to have to catch some passes out of the backfield too against this team. I think, like I said, Kansas City's linebackers are going to be susceptible in this game. So I think if they can maybe get some routes, maybe try to get a wheel route early in the game, try to make a big play, maybe with whoever you feel like is the most comfortable. Maybe it's Tevin in that position. Maybe you do that and try to take advantage of that weakness on Kansas City's defense. And then, like I said, it's going to be important for them to pick up like 4, 5 yards a carry. You want to, you definitely feel like San Francisco wants to end this game as quickly as possible in terms of time possession and control the clock. So you want to be able to have long, methodical drives. So that means you need your running backs to hold the ball, get positive yardage, get first downs, and that helps contribute to you being able to hold the ball and keep Patrick Mahomes and the offense off the field, which is obviously what you want to do. So obviously that's going to be one of the more important things that you want to do if you're the San Francisco 49ers. Your running backs have to play well. Right now it's been Raheem Mostert, but you never know. It could be Tevin in this game. It could be Breida in this game. Because like I said, they have a 3 running back committee, so you really never know who it's going to be on a night-to-night basis. Next position group that has to play well in this game is the San Francisco wide receivers. This is probably what some people may consider one of it's a good receiving core, but they're young. With Emmanuel Sanders, which they added for the veteran leadership, and Emmanuel Sanders has always been a good receiver, a guy who can get open, get you first downs. And Deebo Samuel's been coming on, and they have a lot of other young guys on the team with George Kittle who move the ball. And they're going to have to play very well. They're going to have to be able to get open against these Kansas City corners. Because, again, Kansas City is a little susceptible themselves in the secondary. And they have to be able to get open. Again, San Francisco, I think, will take a few shots in this game. So they need to connect on those. But they also are probably going to also take a few. They're going to take a lot of passes, I think, over the middle. A lot of passes within 10 to 15 yards. Because like I said, ball control is very important. And they're going to try to ball control the offense. So that way they can keep the ball out of Patrick Mahomes' hands. Because like I said, I don't think they want to get into a scoring match with Kansas City and big play for big play. So I think the receivers have to play one of their best games that they've played. It's going to be very important for them to play one of the best games they've played because they're going to need it if they're going to be successful in this game trying to beat a high-powered offense like the Kansas City Chiefs. And the receivers have to play some of the best football that they've played this entire year. And the last position group that has to play well in this game is the defensive line of the San Francisco 49ers. Because this game could be won and lost by the performance of the defensive line. If their defensive line dominates, I would feel like San Francisco would win this game. Because it was shown earlier this year when the Colts did it. When they dominated up front and ran the ball. Now, listen, I'm not expecting Kansas City to be held to 13 points, but you see this offense is not as explosive and it can be held and kept under control. And the 49ers are a better unit than the Chiefs were. And if they can do that, I feel like there's very strong possibility they will win this game. If their defensive line struggles and can't get pressure, it's going to be a very long day for San Francisco. Very, very long day. If they do not get pressure on Patrick Mahomes and stop the running game, if they do not get pressure on Patrick Mahomes and stop him from having time in the pocket and getting it to these receivers, I don't see much of a chance for San Francisco to win this game. So it's going to be key that the defensive line for the San Francisco 49ers has a big game. Key. Very, very key. But that's all. But we're about to take a quick break. Next segment, we're going to talk about the future of the New Orleans quarterback position with Drew Brees mulling retirement. And we're going to talk about executives not feeling comfortable after Burrow with the quarterbacks in this year's NFL draft coming up.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
Welcome back to the GSMC Football Podcast. Last segment, I gave you 5 players in position groups, which the San Francisco with more position groups than the Kansas City Chiefs. But 5 players position groups that are needed for the San Francisco 49ers to be able to pull off the win and beat Kansas City in Super Bowl 52 on Sunday. Now we're going to get into some more news and some notes around the league. And really just more surrounding the quarterback position. So obviously, as you know, you're a Saints fan and you keep up with the Saints because you're a big NFL fan like myself. You know I'm a Falcon fan, I'm a rival. Drew Brice recently said that he is mulling over retirement and he'll have a decision in about a month. Obviously, nobody really knows what Drew is going to do. He seems like he's playing well, so you would maybe think he would come back for at least one more year. He is 42, I believe, this year, or going to turn 42 this year. But at the same time, he may feel like he maybe can't do it for another 16-game stretch, and he doesn't want to bring down the city that has cherished him for so long in New Orleans. Well, Jay Glazer from Fox Insider reported that the Saints feel like they already have their next franchise quarterback after Drew Brees on the roster. And it's not Teddy Bridgewater. It's a guy they've been using as a gadget player for ever since he's been in the league, from BYU. Taysom Hill. Now, this comes as a shock to a lot of players. This comes as a shock to a lot of Saints fans, because a lot of people maybe feel like Taysom Hill was never that highly valued as a quarterback coming out of BYU. That's why he's used as a gadget kind of guy on the Saints offense. But Sean Payton has been saying that he feels like Taysom Hill has a future as a starting quarterback in this league. And the report basically is from Jay Glazer that the Saints want Drew Brees to come back for 1 year so they can use that as a bridge year for Taysom Hill. So basically almost like, okay, listen, give us 1 more year. We'll start to invest more resources and time in Taysom Hill at the quarterback position to get him ready to take over for when you retire. And I think, again, it's probably shocking to a lot of Saints fans, because I'm sure they were thinking, who's going to be our next quarterback? Are we going to draft one? Are we going to sign one? Is it going to be Teddy Bridgewater? Nobody was really thinking Taysom Hill. Some of the Saints fans I've talked to aren't really sure about the idea, because again, Taysom Hill was not a guy who was ever valued as a top quarterback prospect coming out. Even though he's had time to develop since then, that's a big chance Sean Payton is taking. Now, I personally think it could be a good idea. I think with the NFL shifting in terms of offensive play, obviously Drew Brees can move in the pocket, but he's not considered a mobile quarterback. Well, obviously Taysom Hill can run. He can outrun some guys. He's an athlete. So I think if he became the new quarterback of the Saints, it adds an element to their offense they never had, which was more of the ability of the quarterback to run. So I could see the Saints, with Sean Payton being such an ingenious offensive coordinator, an offensive mind, maybe doing some RPOs, maybe running more of a Lamar Jackson kind of offense potentially. Because it would fit more with the skill set that Taysom Hill has. I don't think he's going to ask Taysom Hill to be Drew Brees and just stand in the pocket, throw 40, 45 times, and make the right reads. You're going to be like, we're going to move you around, we're going to do some gadget stuff, we're going to do some stuff, keep defenses off balance. And I think it could be smart. He could be getting ahead of the league doing this. Because at first, some people may look at Taysom Hill and think, oh, well, yeah, he can beat us in gadget ways, but if he's like the guy, we think we have a pretty good shot to beat him. And also, again, we don't know if Taysom Hill can really be that guy in that position, because we've never seen Taysom Hill in that spot before. Remember, when Drew Brees went down, they didn't go to Taysom Hill. They went to Teddy Bridgewater. Because if you feel like that, why didn't you just let him be the backup quarterback? But I can also understand why, because they like using Taysom Hill in that gadget role. So having another quarterback helps them be able to do that. Where if Brees goes down, well, now you lose a threat to your offense and you lose your best quarterback. So this honestly could be a very smart move on Sean Payton's behalf, because if they play well, with Taysom Hill under center when Drew Brees retires, that's going to be a very big thing for them. And like I said, I trust Sean Payton's offensive mind, that he will formulate an offense that will still make them just as effective and explosive, but not take away or put too much pressure on Taysom Hill and ask him to do too much. So it's a little interesting nugget, because it's going to be interesting when Brees retires. Is this report going to end up being true and Taysom Hill really is the guy, and they're not going to really think about trying to get a guy? Or maybe this is just, maybe Sean Payton likes him, but then he thinks about it and it's like, you know what? We need to go get another quarterback maybe for competition or something. And in other news, from coming out of the NFL draft, there are some execs around the league who are very concerned with quarterbacks after Joe Burrow. Joe Burrow, after the year he's had, which is considered one of the greatest college football years ever in the history of college football, is going to be undoubtedly the number 1 overall draft pick by the Cincinnati Bengals unless somehow someone gives up a king's ransom to draft up. And everybody feels pretty solid on him, I would think. Where after Burrow, your top quarterbacks are from Tua, Herbert, Love, guys like that, Anthony Gordon. And it sounds like execs are not sure if the quarterbacks after Burrow have that franchise potential that Burrow has. It's kind of crazy saying that about Tua because everybody thought Tua was going to be the number 1 overall guy. Clearly, before he got hurt this year with his hip injuries, where obviously Tua's biggest issue is just injuries. Can he stay healthy? And things like that. Obviously, that's going to be where people are concerned. And outside of that, Justin Herbert, he has all the intangibles, but there are some times where he could have played better. He could have been better. And I think it's important that they do something about that. Because you don't want to draft a guy and then he can't stay healthy. Jordan Love is more of a Patrick Mahomes project kind of player comparison. Like I said, Herbert's a guy who has some raw potential. Has potential, definitely. And then, Gordon is kind of like Gardner Minshew. Not the best arm strength, but accurate and very good anticipation. And obviously, every year in the draft, we always have quarterbacks who go higher than they should because of the neediness of the position. And some scouts feel like there's not a lot of depth in this draft. Because like I said, some people feel like overall this draft class is not good. And Joe Burrow is the only consensus franchise player in the group. Which again, like I said, is crazy because everybody was saying Tua was too. And, it's one of those things where also Tua, if you think about him, some people feel like hasn't played that well in big games. Even in the game against LSU, he only had barely over 50% completion percentage, and he's had injuries. And, it's going to be interesting to see what happens. Obviously, next year's quarterback class, some people may feel like could be better because you have 2 guys people feel like could be franchise quarterbacks, and Trevor Lawrence, who they feel like could be one of the best prospects to come out since John Elway or Andrew Luck. And the second best quarterback, and another guy people feel like could be a franchise quarterback, in Justin Fields. So it'll be interesting to see what happens in this year's draft with the quarterback position. We'll obviously probably hear more news, more ramblings about who's interested in who's favoring who's going to trade up to get who. So it's going to be definitely interesting to see what happens going into the future and seeing who picks up who and who drafts who. Because it looks like Joe Burrow is the only one people are very much certain on in this draft. But we're going to take a little break here. And coming back, I'm going to give you my last final preview and breakdown of the game, the big game on Sunday in Super Bowl 52 between the San Francisco 49ers and the Kansas City Chiefs. And I will give you my predictions on who I think will come home with the Lombardi Trophy right here on the podcast.
This is your ultimate stop for everything sports. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Should I say more? From the NFL, MLB, the NBA to MMA, it's all in here. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Listen now.
GSMC Football Podcast. Last segment, we talked about some quarterback news in New Orleans. about potentially Taysom Hill being the new franchise quarterback for the New Orleans Saints after Drew Brees retires, as the Saints hope he stays for one more year to give him a bridge year to get ready to be the starting quarterback of the Saints. And also, we talked about how some execs are not very fond of quarterbacks after Burrow, as they feel like he's the only franchise caliber guy in the draft right now with the least amount of holes. And now I'm going to give you my final preview and breakdown and my prediction on who I think is going to win Super Bowl 52 on Sunday. Obviously, like I've said on multiple occasions, this is a matchup between the most dominant team and the most complete team. It's like what some people like to say, a rock versus a hard place. An unstoppable force and an unmovable object. It's one of those things. Both teams, have their strengths. Kansas City is one of the best, and potentially could be one of the best passing attacks ever play in this league, ever since the show on turf with the Rams of the early 2000s, late 90s. San Francisco is a traditional West Coast zone running team who runs the ball to establish play action and time of possession and grinding out with great defense and great defensive line play. It's a clash of two styles, both meant to capitalize on each other's weaknesses. Obviously, if the 49ers defensive line has their day, you can get pressure on attacking Mahomes, you limit their passing game, they don't get big plays, they don't score points. Now, all of a sudden, the running game can take over for Kansas City, and Jimmy Garoppolo can make key throws to win the ball game. But on the other side of things, if San Francisco can't get pressure and Patrick Mahomes gets time and he lights up San Francisco's defense, which is susceptible for big plays, now you're creating a high-scoring game that potentially the 49ers cannot keep up in, potentially, in this game. It really could go both ways in this situation. Both teams have elite tight ends. Obviously, in terms of the wide receiving core, clearly the advantage is on Kansas City time, but on the running back core, the advantage clearly is on San Francisco's. San Francisco has the advantage in running back and offensive line in this game. Kansas City has the advantage in quarterback and wide receivers in this game. Defensively, you would say San Francisco has the advantage on the defensive line, linebackers, and you could even go with secondary if you wanted to. So you would feel like defensively, San Francisco is a much better team than Kansas City, but Kansas City has played like a top 10 defense to end the year, and they have been able to get turnovers, and they've been able to get pressure on the quarterback in the last half of this year. Both teams are pretty much 100% healthy going into this game, so we're not sitting here kind of like, oh, well, they're losing a lot of big pieces and they can't play. Unless a late injury happens, which sometimes that can happen. Maybe somebody gets sick, a flu, things that you can't really expect or predict to happen, or you saw in the injury report earlier in the week. You have two coaches, Andy Reid, who's trying to get rid of this narrative of never being able to win the big game, never getting over the hump, being this great creative offensive mind, but never being able to do that one thing that has eluded him, which is win a Super Bowl. That some people may have been hesitant to keep him out of the top echelon of elite coaches because of that. Or you have Kyle Shanahan, who has his first head coaching in, is the son of Mike Shanahan, one of the best coaches in NFL history. Both running the same type of offenses, having the same type of great offensive creative mind. Kyle Shanahan obviously being a part of that 28-3 Super Bowl with the Falcons as the offensive coordinator. A lot of people feel like his play calling in the second half is one of the reasons why they lost that game. And him redeeming himself from that game and winning this Super Bowl as a head coach of the San Francisco 49ers. As you can tell, both teams are coming down very different paths. Obviously, it's going to be key that both teams want to do what they do best throughout the season in this game, because you don't want to get into, obviously, San Francisco a shootout, even though they have won in a shootout against the Saints. And obviously, Kansas City, you're not really a grinded out team. So that's probably not the greatest thing, but I feel like it's still more favorable for them because all it takes is that one big play and the game can be busted wide open, or potentially that could be the play that gets them going. Like Kansas City has that type of offense, is that even if they struggle, they can get going. It's a game where you can never be 100% comfortable. It's one of those things where even when you played the Patriots with Tom Brady, you never could get comfortable the whole game. Because eventually they're going to hang around, and you know how clutch Brady was. So you can never get comfortable. And I feel like Kansas City's getting to that level where you can never get comfortable. You can never sit here and think, oh yeah, we have this game in the bag. You can never get to that level. You're always going to have to know Kansas City can put up points on us quickly. They have that type of offense. So we need to be on top of our game at all times. San Francisco, obviously, they're a team that if they can run the ball on you successfully, that opens up their entire offense to use against you. They can use all types of play calls, all types of gadget plays, keeps the defense on the toes, and you don't know what's coming next. It creates a very different kind of dynamic in a way, because it keeps Patrick Mahomes off the field there to run it successfully, which gives him less possessions, which makes him maybe feel like, okay, I'm not going to get that many possessions. I need to do a lot with the possessions that I actually end up getting, which may make him have to force some throws, make some throws that are unnecessary in certain positions of the game. Maybe Andy Reid tries to call more of an aggressive game because, hey, it's not like this game's going to be like, oh yeah, we're going to get our fair share here, they're going to get their fair share, and we can kind of just do what we do. You may feel like, oh, we definitely have to really go for it against this defense and hope my offensive line can hold up against this very fierce pass defense and defensive line of the San Francisco 49ers. You know, both teams coming into this game, you know, one of these teams could win this game because they have the team structure on both ends to create a dynasty or a potential short dynasty with the teams that they have. Obviously, if Kansas City becomes a dynasty, they will be known as the offensive juggernaut dynasty. They won because they just were so good offensively, and their defense was always good enough to get them to where they wanted to go. San Francisco has the possibility of being a great dynasty because they have a great complete team, great running game, smart quarterback that makes great throws, good enough receivers, an elite tight end, a good offensive line, an elite defensive line, good secondary, good linebackers, good coaching all around. Almost kind of like the Patriots in a way. They're good at so many different areas, and that's how they're always able to be in the picture at the end of the day. But also, like I said, Kansas City is like the early best show on turf Rams. They always had a chance every year because their offense was so dominant. Trying to stop that offense with Kurt Warner and Torrey Holt, and Isaac Bruce, Marshall Faulk. That was not an easy matchup for any defense. And that's what Kansas City presents to you. So I think it's going to be very interesting to see what happens. Because both teams are going to come out here, I think, trying to establish their game plan, trying to establish what they've been all year. And then after the first quarter, maybe into the halfway to the second quarter, we'll see which team's plan is working. And we'll see what happens in the second half when teams have to make adjustments to try to control that. Maybe they have to become more aggressive. Maybe they have to go out of their comfort zone a little bit because this is a Super Bowl. Super Bowl, you put everything on the line because this is the last game of the year. Any trick play, any gadget, anything you want to try, you do it here because you don't ever want to go back from a game like this and think, if I had just called that play, what would have happened? If I had just made this call or I had made this decision, what could have changed? Could we have been more successful? Could we have won? Is that what lost me the game? And I'm going to give my prediction on this game right now, and I feel like the Kansas City Chiefs are going to go home with the Super Bowl trophy. I think Patrick Mahomes is going to win his first championship, and I think the dynasty will begin for Kansas City, and he will be in the Super Bowl many more times, in my opinion, in my thought process for the Kansas City Chiefs because of how dominant they are offensively. But I do believe this will be a close game, but I am going with Kansas City to win this game and take home the Lombardi Trophy. Thank you for listening to the GSMC Football Podcast here on the GSMC Podcast Network. I hope all of you have a great day, and please don't forget to subscribe and write a review. Also follow us on social media on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. Thank you.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Football Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.